Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. You might be noticing from the title and my setup, we're not talking about a book today. um, just about an hour ago I came out of the cinema. I have just been to see the live action adaptation of Lilo and Stitch and I need to talk about it. Because I have thoughts and I think they're almost semi-coherent, so I figure I should film this and actually get this out whilst they're up here. So, we do need to preface this. It might be a little bit obvious, but if it's not, just in case, I am a massive Lilo and Stitch fan. It's not just my favourite animated film, it's not just my favourite Disney film. Lilo and Stitch is my all-time favourite film. The animated film came out in 2002, I was 12, and it spoke to me. It spoke to me in ways I didn't realise it was speaking to me until I was much older and I was processing things and going through and learning about myself. But Lilo and Stitch has such a special place in my heart because when I was little, when I was 12 and younger, when I was Lilo's age, I was an oddball. I was the outcast. I was the one getting bullied in school. I was the weird kid. And Lilo and Stitch taught me that that was okay. It's okay to be a weird kid. So, with all that said, and with all that in mind, I was naturally really nervous going into this film. I appreciate it only came out yesterday, so I didn't exactly wait that long. But in the lead up, because this was announced 2 years ago, in the last sort of 2 years, I have been on the fence. Am I going to go see this film or not? You know, we're all a little over the Disney live actions. I am there with you. I've not watched the last, I don't know how many. I've not watched a Disney live action in some time. I actually couldn't tell you what my last one was. And yeah, as soon as they announced that it was Lilo and Stitch, they were doing, instant nerves. Instant, I don't know if they can do this. I don't know how they're going to do this. And then they announced it was still going to be Chris Saunders voicing Stitch. Chris Saunders voiced the original Stitch. He has been every Stitch voice, be it in the films, the cartoon series, any of the games. It's always Chris Saunders. So it's like, okay, we can be okay with this. And then I saw what they did with Stitch, because they released Stitch's animation first. And my hopes rose. Because you know what? I don't hate it. I don't have him down with me because he lives in my bed. He is my bedtime teddy. I'm a 35-year-old woman and I sleep with a teddy and I am unashamed about that. But the original plushie that was released back in 2002 with the release of the film, I have that plushie. I have that stuffed teddy. He, like I say, he lives upstairs in my bed and he has been in my bed since then. For, what is that now, 23 years I've owned this Stitch. He's seen better days, but he's still holding up good. He survived a wash not long ago, which I was quite impressed with. I was fully expecting him to disintegrate and I was prepared to be heartbroken, but he didn't, so we're great. But where this tangent has come from is how they animated live action Stitch is very much on par with the original plushie that I have. Down to the fur texture and everything. I was actually really impressed with that, and I have continued to remain impressed with that. And then they started showing us, in the last couple of months, they started showing us clips of the film. And I went from to oh no. I genuinely thought I was going to hate it. I went into it going, this is going to be terrible, because of the few clips I've seen from the trailers, this looks awful. This looks terrible. This is going to be, oh god, it's going to be Cats all over again. We all know that the travesty of the Cats, the movie. Cats is my favourite musical. Cats is what got me into musicals. And then they give us that, and I was fully expecting it to be Lilo and Stitch to be that all over again. We were joking with a friend that's like, I cannot wear a necklace when I go to see Lilo and Stitch because I came so close to breaking the chain of the necklace I was wearing when I saw Cats, because I sat like this playing with it in rage and anger. So, with all of that prefaced and said, I went to see Stitch. I went to see Lilo and Stitch. Before I go any further, this is going to be spoiler filled. I cannot talk about this film without spoilers. I know, generally speaking, I am a spoiler-free channel, but this one video has to be an exception because. That said, the animated film has been out for 23 years, so if you don't know the basic story of Lilo and Stitch, you've had 23 years, guys. I'm going to try and break this down into things that I liked, because there are genuinely things about this film that I liked. Things that I thought I was going to hate, and I didn't. And then the things that didn't work, because there are things that didn't work. I think with any adaptation, there's going to be good and there's going to be bad. And with my inherent bias and my admitted, I went in there expecting it to be terrible, and I went in there looking for... Yeah, I tried not to, but I was looking for the bad. So there is going to be quite a few bad bits. But we have pleasant surprises, which I'm so pleasantly surprised about. So let's get into those. First off, I've already touched on it. Stitch's animation. Beautiful. I absolutely love the animation they've done with Stitch, and seeing him on the screen, like, yes. No faults. No criticisms there. I really like what they've done with Nani and Lilo and their relationship in particular. That dynamic that they have of this struggling to... Like, their relationship has to change just due to the nature of where we start off in the story. The story starts with they have very recently lost their parents. Nani has now become Lilo's full-time guardian. Lilo is a very special kid who needs, she needs a strong guardian, a steady guardian. And Nani is basically a kid herself. She is at that period where she's between high school and college. So not in a position where she should be expected to, and definitely not where she expected to have to take care of her younger sibling and step into that parental role. And I think they did that beautifully. Absolutely wonderfully. Nani's character in particular was fleshed out so much more in this live action than it was in the animated film. We learn so much more about her. You really get to understand her struggles a lot more. The social work plot arc. I have to caveat this with specifically what they did with the social worker arc. The actress did a wonderful job. I thought she brought a lot of soul and compassion into the role. And I really like the changes they made to that arc. Nani is still being assessed by the social work. Nani and Lilo as a unit are still being assessed for their suitability. And, it still very much starts off with, and is carried throughout, is like, can Lilo stay with Nani? Is Nani deemed fit enough to look after Lilo? Where they can get off with it in the animated film, because they can take a further step away from reality, they can have that stern character come in and, be like, back up or we take her away. They brought a lot more compassion into it, I think, and a lot more sensitivity. And it was very much... It came across, it wasn't the social worker, I can't remember what they called her, but it wasn't, I'm here to do what's best for Lilo. It's, I'm here to work out a situation that's best for you both. whilst ultimately Lilo has to be priority number one because she is only 6 years old and Nani is technically an adult, but only just. The social worker is very much, I want this to work out for you both. I am going to give you every opportunity and everything I can, and I'm going to be a cheerleader for you. But I'm also going to sit down and have the difficult conversations with you and treat you like an adult and not a menace or a pest. So I really, really liked what they did there. Yeah. Ultimately, I think everything that I really liked evolves around Lilo and Nani. I really, really liked what they did. Throughout it, you could tell that the writers and the storyboarders really, that was what they wanted to focus on. Yeah, these are the things I really liked. Things I expected to hate. 2 things in particular. First is this guy. I fully expected to hate everything about what they did with Pleakley. Especially when we saw from the trailers that Pleakley was not cross-dressing. Pleakley was not loving his... There was no scene of like Pleakley being like in his dress and in his terrible wig, looking so misshapen and like he'd been dragged through a hedge, but feeling so beautiful. Because ultimately that's what we all love about Pleakley and his fashion, is that Pleakley dresses for Pleakley. And we didn't see that in the trailers, and we saw Pleakley dressed almost normal. And I use normal loosely, but almost like, you know, an everyday man. I went into this expecting to hate Pleakley in it. Or not to hate Pleakley, but to hate what they did with Pleakley. I was like, part of the whole thing is that Pleakley is so obsessed with Earth, but has no clue. And you know what? They actually did him okay. Instead of having him have like no concept or no idea of what it is, they gave Pleakley a minor in Earth textiles. Like, guys, loved that. And he's just so, they kept his enthusiasm, and yeah. The characterization of Pleakley, I'm like, actually, you know what? It actually was quite cute. It worked. It really did work. Yeah. I also kind of expected to hate David. And what they were doing with David. Now, I didn't have the 180 almost that I had with Pleakley. But I think he was okay. I mean, I expected to have like a visceral, whatever the hell this is, I don't like. He's not quite the same David, but kind of hits a lot of the main points that David does. He is there for them. But more in a really... He's just awkward. He's just straight up awkward. And, you know, that's kind of all it is. Animated David, you could argue, is quite swoon-worthy. Live action David is adorkable at best. But I didn't hate it. I was like, it's fine. If it was my first introduction to David, you'd be like, actually, you know, it's kind of cute. He had a lot to live up to, okay? Animated David is on a pedestal, and it was a very high pedestal. But he didn't crash and burn. So there was that. I've already touched on it in the things I really liked, but I expected to hate the addition, mostly out of spite, because how dare they? But I very much expected to hate the addition of the new social worker character. And I actually really like what they did with it, so there was that. What else did I like? I think that might be it. Now on to the not so good. The not so good. Some of these are nitpicks, some of these are genuine what the actual heck's. So let's start with some nitpicks. The pacing was rushed. It just, sometimes it felt fine. So no, the pacing was a bit all over the place, if I'm honest. Personally, for me, these are all my thoughts, my feelings. But sometimes it was fine. And then other times, wow. Oh my gosh, I'm grateful I've already seen the animated, because we are proper rushing through this. And maybe it's fine for anyone who has lived under a rock and hasn't seen the original. I apologize if I just insulted anyone there. I'm sure they're very nice and comfortable under your rocks. But, and I don't know. I'm sure there were bits where it was fine, and yeah, if you haven't seen it, maybe you don't feel like you're missing out on anything. Maybe you don't feel like you missed any beats, or it felt fine. But especially like the beginning sequence, the introduction sequence, when we're not on Earth yet, we're still in space. Stitch and Jumba are on trial. And yeah, we go from there to Stitch being sentenced to exile, to the ship, to escaping. That took maybe half the time it did in the animated film, but still hit all the beats. It was proper, okay, we just need to get this over and done with. It very much felt like, right, can we just get through this so we can get to Earth? We just really need to like wrap this up. Come on, move. Get to Earth. Wow. I was sitting watching there going, what, how, what, oh wow, okay, and we're on Earth. Okay, whoa. Wow. If there was a wind machine in here, I'd be very, very windswept, because that was a rush. And I felt like the morality, is that the right way to put it? But yeah, the morality of the council, it was, we went from, literally in the space of like 2 sentences, they're arguing, Jumba's arguing that Stitch is like this ultimate weapon, he's a genius, he's highly intelligent. And we go from there, it's like, to the Grand Councilwoman going, well, to prove that you're an intelligent, show us there's good in you. And it's like, whoa. They never claimed he was good. They never claimed he was good. We were going with a claim of intelligence and genius. That does not equal good. And it's just like, okay. And then because he swore at them, instant exile, which we know happens, but I don't know, it just didn't work as well for me. I'm also going to say pretty much that entire opening sequence is all CGI or animated, and you can tell. There is, and I realised as I was sitting watching it, one of the things I was really nervous about, and one of the things that was making me nervous, was watching these live action scenes going, these just don't feel right. And that is because next to the CGI, they're very displaced. Or, how do I describe this? They don't feel natural. They don't feel like they meld naturally together. When you see the animated characters, even Stitch to an extent, but Pleakley in particular, when Pleakley is in his true form, when you see him next to live action humans, it's like, yeah, you can tell he was placed there. It's not melding well. The CGI was obvious to the point where it was like, is this CGI or is this straight up animation? It's towing that line, and it takes you out of it. It took me out of it. Because there were a couple of scenes, especially towards the end. That end scene where they're on the beach. The ship's just crashed, they're on the beach. We're debating with the councilwoman, can Stitch stay? And it's like, this is my family. It's little and it's broken, but it's still good. yeah, I'm like, I want to be emotionally invested here, but wow. Pleakley in particular, it's really incredibly obvious with Pleakley, but even the Grand Councilwoman, you're just sitting there going, you guys were not actually part of the scene when they were acting, were you? Uh, another nitpick, and this is a proper nitpick. Whatever they were using to substitute for Stitch, when they were doing the acting, it was not Stitch shaped or sized. And this is no shade to the actress, but it was really particularly obvious whenever Lilo was interacting with Stitch. Anytime she hugged him, you could see the arms go around because you could see like she's trying to put the emotion and she's trying to do this scene, but I just felt like every time it's like, I can tell you're being really conscious of where you place your arms. None of this feels natural. And I know part of this is going to go down to the age of the actress, and it's probably the first time she's had to do this. I don't know if this is her first film or not, I've not looked that deeply into it, but chances are this is the first time she's had to act with or without her counterpart. But, and even times like when Nanny was giving him like a head scratch, an ear scratch, there were times it was like, you're not quite touching Stitch. And it's, yeah, it just, again, it was jarring. Okay. Something I disliked more than I expected to. And that goes, I'm going to put it down to pacing and the fact that they made the choice to focus more on Nani and Lilo than they did anything else. But Stitch's character arc. This is kind of a biggie for me because it's Stitch. I think it's mostly down to the pacing. But I just... his character growth didn't feel as believable. It went from being bad and creating havoc, Lilo putting the thingamabob on his neck, and suddenly Stitch wants to try and be good, and he's learning about family, and it was missing something. I think just a couple of extra beats in between, and it just, yeah, I think it's just because it just felt so rushed, and sometimes it was almost like an afterthought. It didn't quite work. Exactly, Maisie. Exactly. She may or may not come up. We'll see. I've got two more things I need to talk to you guys about. Yes. Hi. Do you want to come and say hi? Yes. Maisie would also like to express her disappointment. Look at this face. This face is so disappointment and full of judgment. And quite rightly so, my dear. Because where was Gantu? I had not clocked when we were doing all of like the actor reveals and things. Actually, no, I've got 3 things I need to raise with you. But the first of these 3 things, where was Gantu? Gantu is completely written out. Completely written out. I think that's a shame. Because, in a way, he was the film's main antagonist. One of the things I really like about Lilo and Stitch is that there's no bad guys. This is just people learning to be who they are, to accept themselves from themselves, and to accept that we can all be a little bit weird. And we don't all have to conform to society's norms. You know? And Gantu, in the animated film, I love about him is that he's just doing what he thinks is right. He's just doing his job. He's out there to catch the criminal. Yeah, there was no Gantu. Gantu's gone. Which, you know, dashes my hopes of getting Gantu merch, because I don't have her up here, but I do have a couple of Lilos. They just didn't quite fit. I have Nanny on a backpack. I have a, you can't see it up there, but I have a David. And I have a Bubbles in Lego form. I have a Bleakley. I do, in fact, have a Jumba. Because I left this film needing to hug Jumba, which is why he's not up there. But I don't have a Gantu. Actually, the only things I'm missing are a Gantu and Reuben. I thought with the film coming out, maybe I'll get a Gantu. Well, they're obviously not going to be making any more Gantus because he wasn't in the film. And this leads me on to my next biggie. And that's Jumba. I hated everything they did with Jumba. I genuinely, I hated what they have done with, I cannot believe what they have done with Jumba. So, okay, the actor, I can't remember who the actor is. Obviously his voice is fine when Jumba's in human shape, using the holograms. But when Jumba is in his true form, the actor's voice does not suit him. At all. That is the first thing I clocked, because he's one of the first talking characters and you're just like, whoa, no. No. Heck no. Then his character arc. It starts off fine. It starts off kind of as you expect. Jumba just kind of being a bit gung-ho, going for it, shooting off when he needs to. You know, having to be reined in a little bit by Bleakley, you know, protect the humans, etc. And then they kind of try to wedge Gantu's story arc into Jumba's story arc. And do you know what that gives us? It gives us a villain in a story where there was not originally a villain. They genuinely make Jumba a bad guy. When we're in the scene where in the animated film, Jumba is chasing Stitch around the house and accidentally destroying the house whilst trying to get to Stitch. In the live action, Jumba's in the house, Stitch and Lilo run out of the house, leave the house. Jumba starts destroying the house. Because, whilst having this sort of like mini rant monologue about how pathetic humans are with their attachment, which is completely out of place because until like 2 days ago, in film time, he'd never heard of Earth, he'd no idea what humans were, these are all brand new to him, he doesn't know anything about this planet, so why are you suddenly raging at their attachment to things and people and memories? Like, they literally... One of the best things about Jumba is that Jumba really wants to be an evil genius. He wants to be that mad scientist villain. But he has too much heart. And he just can't. A huge part of why Stitch is such a lovable character is that, yes, he was designed to be bad, but he was designed by Jumba. Jumba put himself into Stitch. And some of his best qualities into Stitch, and for me that was including his heart and his compassion. Live action Jumba has none of this. As we're watching that scene, I'm sitting there thinking, what on earth? This is not Jumba. And also, how are we going to get from this to, presumably in the next sort of like 15-20 minutes, when we get to the end of the film, how are we going to go from willfully destroying their house and mocking them for their attachment and giving off proper villain vibes to becoming our crazy eccentric uncle? Like, how do we do that? The answer is we don't. Jumba doesn't even get left on Earth. He gets picked up. The Grand Councilwoman and her folk turn up. One of the first things they do is soak Jumba up out of the sea because, plane crashed. Ship crashed into the sea. Jumba doesn't get a hitch. He doesn't get a ride back to shore with David on his board. No. He just gets left there. And then the Grand Councilwoman comes and she shooks him up. Pleakley gets to stay. Because, we go through the motions. Stitch gets to, your rules are rules. Stitch has been exiled. He needs to stay in exile. But there's nothing to say he can't carry out his exile on Earth. As long as he has a guardian. That guardian becomes Pleakley. Pleakley very enthusiastically volunteers for that. Of course he does. And Jumba stays on the ship. Jumba is no longer part of our found family. What the actual fuck? What the actual, guys? Like, come on. And my last one, which is another biggie, is I really don't like what they did with Bubbles. I'm trying to cast my brain back to when they were announcing cast and the social worker was announced and it was actually this new character and it was definitely not Corporal Bubbles. And then the actor for Bubbles was announced after that. I don't know if it's right or not, but I suspect there was some rushed writing to shoehorn him back into the film because of fan outrage. With the exception of, I think, one scene? Maybe? One scene? He may as well have not been in that film. He didn't actually contribute anything to the film. In the film, he is there as a CIA agent, tracking Stitch, trying to capture Stitch. Who, he doesn't quite know it's Stitch, but he knows that an alien life form has landed, or he suspects, and he's there doing that. And he's not this stern, stoic, I'm firm because I need to be, but actually I have, a heart of gold inside. He's just kind of a bit of a bumbling idiot. I don't feel as viscerally as I do about his character as I do with Jumba, but it was still like, what is this? The only thing you have in common, the only thing his character has in common with the animated film is his name. That's it. And it was very much like you put him back in there because, yeah, he was not needed. He really wasn't needed. So, with all of that said, would I recommend y'all go and see this film? I don't know. I think I would recommend... Okay, so if you're like me and you want to be able to form your own opinion, go see it. Because the only way you're going to go see it, go form your own opinion. And especially if you have the same amount of patience that I have for this sort of thing, which is none. Yeah, go see it. Go make up your own mind. I promise it's not nearly as terrible as you think it's going to be. It still has a lot of heart and soul. It's not quite the same story, although it hits pretty much all the same plot points. The ultimate soul of it, I think, is not quite the same, but it has that same tone. It's not quite the same message, I think, but it definitely has that family and love it. Yeah, it's like that family message, and not every family is typical. So yeah, I think it is worth going to see. That said, if you're not a massive Lilo and Stitch fan, or you're just like, it was fine, and you're not particularly jiving with the live actions, wait for it to come on Disney Plus. I don't think, especially because films get put onto Disney and onto streaming so quickly these days. You're not gonna have that massive year plus wait that we used to, or like 6 months to a year, whatever, however long wait that we used to for things to go into DVD. You know, in this day and age of shorter attention spans and whatnot, it will go on quicker. So ultimately, I say just wait for it, because I don't think seeing it on the big screen will add anything to your experience. And yeah, my last sort of like wrap it up thoughts. I guess I went in fully expecting this to be a car crash of Cat's proportions, and I was ultimately pleasantly surprised. They didn't ruin my favourite film. I think that's the best praise I can give it, is they didn't ruin my favourite film. Am I going to rewatch it? Probably not. I will pretty much always, I think going forward, I will pretty much always pick the animated film first, because, you know, it is the original and it is the best. I have literally no criticisms of the original. I do unfortunately have criticism of this one. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised, and it was not nearly as bad as... I'm not going to go so far as to say I really enjoyed it and it was brilliant, but it wasn't bad, and it was fine. It was fine. Anyway, this has been my my thoughts on Lilo and Stitch. Next video, I promise we will return to our usual bookish content. And yeah, we're gonna leave it there. We're gonna say bye. And I think I'm gonna go put the 2002 animated film on. So bye.